It's The World This Week, The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us from Paris, Afghan photographer and visual artist Rada Akbar. Thank you so much for being with us. You've just been evacuated. We'll hear your story in a moment. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Whenever there was a breaking story out of Kabul, he was always a rock for us. Bilal Sarawi, you always tell it like it is. It's a huge relief to know that you and your immediate family are safe. And it's also, I guess, with a heavy heart that we cross to you, not in Kabul, but in Doha. Thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me.
Sarah Daniel, senior correspondent at the French news magazine Looms, and the author of The Horror of the Caliphate, your latest book. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And France24.com, senior editor, Leila Jacinto. How are you?
Busy.
Busy indeed. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag World This Week. In the chaos of a capital falling, Rada Akbar, you took it upon yourself to make one final statement. Self-portraits, we looked at the reprints in the New York Times. When you see them, they have the feel of, we can show them up on the screen here, of before and after pictures. This is where exactly that these pictures were taken. Rada Akbar, where were these pictures taken?
I have taken them in my own apartment.
Right.
And
you're now here in France. It's been a harrowing 2 weeks. It's been a harrowing, what is it, 10 days for you since you left Kabul?
It's been 1 week because I arrived in Paris on Thursday evening.
And your thoughts when you see just how tumultuous the news cycle has been since you've arrived?
It's been very frustrating because when I arrived, my family was still stuck there, and some of my relatives, some of my friends, and finally we managed to evacuate, to take my family to the airport 2 days ago. And till then, it was very frustrating and exhausting because I was not able to sleep, to take rest, and to take care of myself. And but it's still, like, there are a lot of people that I know are close to me are still stuck in Afghanistan, in Kabul.
Still stuck in Afghanistan. And your thoughts when you were making that final trip to the airport?
I'm not sure that they can make it to the airport anymore.
Right. That's something we'll be talking about. Bilal, you posted a photo to Twitter when you left. You stated in that post, wanted to end it with this photo. I will continue to report on Afghanistan and give the Afghan people a voice! Exclamation point. Bilal Sarawi, your thoughts now that you're out?
Devastated and heartbroken by the fact that I was forced to abandon my country, my city, my passion, my profession, and my circle of friends. Only 2 weeks before the fall of the government and fall of Afghanistan into the hands of Taliban, I had visited the northern neighborhood of Khairkhana, covering the story of people who were forced by the fighting in places like Kunduz province, Takhar, and Badakhshan. And I remember interviewing one family who, got all very sad, and they were crying when they told me that all they could bring with themselves to Kabul was a pair of clothes. And it also made me very emotional, and I started crying because as a kid fleeing the civil war, this is what had happened to me. Little did I know that in a few weeks' time, I would be forced once more to leave my country. I could only pick up my laptop, my iPhone, and I could not even pick up my notebook, of contacts that I would usually carry with myself. I couldn't tell my family members. In this city of Kabul that I call home, and I had this massive attachment to it that gave me the strength through thick and thin, did not feel safe for me. This city of 6 million people, I just could not feel safe anywhere. After hiding for a couple of nights, I was one of the very lucky ones to make it to the Hamid Karzai International Airport. And what was even more heartbreaking, that I met around 150 Afghans who were part of that evacuation. And in them, I saw all of Afghanistan. The most popular TV host, Bamda de Khosh for Tulu TV, this female presenter, she was a household name. We would start our mornings actually with her, and my wife recognized her. Afghanistan's Banksy, the most popular artist, was there, and the most popular TV presenter, the comedian. And this is, after all, the brain drain of the most educated generation. And I also found it quite actually emotional when I knew that I was saying goodbye to my city. As I started walking towards the plane after I'd been interviewed by Lise Doucet, who's a longtime friend, I started crying because I knew that this is the last time I'm going to see Kabul, my city. And I looked towards the mountains, that had always given me the strength somehow, and strength to the citizens of that city. And I just could not hold myself, hoping that one day I would come back, hoping to that scenario. But it was a very, very painful moment.
Sarah Daniel, you heard Radha there saying, her immediate relatives, like Bilal's, able to get out, but there are others she says she knows that won't be able to.
Yes, of course. And, before we try to explain what's going on, and we have to pause 1 minute to have some emotion for those people who are in hiding. And I received, like all of my colleagues, a lot of letters and cry for help. But the last one I received was this morning from a general who was a civil servant. And if I may, I would like to read 1 or 2 sentences. He says, I'm writing this email to you from Kabul, why I do not exactly know for how long I will survive or when I will be captured by the Taliban. They have started searching door to door and targeting government officials. To be honest, I'm not afraid of death, but I do not want to be captive with humiliation. At this stage of my life, all my concerns are for my 3 little girls and my wife. I'm afraid that the day will come when my daughter will be taken as prisoner of war and I will no longer be alive to defend them.
Wow. Lila Jacinto, it's not like this is out of the blue. You and I were sitting in this very studio, June, July, wondering if there'd be a Saigon moment, if it would be sooner rather than later. Your thoughts on all this that we've just heard from Radha, Bilal, and Sarah?
There is absolutely, this was a 20-year conflict. And so there's so many people who have deep links to Afghanistan. We are seasoned journalists, but the trauma of the frustration of not being able to help your former colleagues get out, the messages is extremely hard. And absolutely right, Francois, this is a disaster foretold. We did not expect Kabul to fall quite as quickly as it did, but we knew this was going to happen. I mean, this was slowly in the making. And when Bilal talks about, all these very well-known Afghans on the flight out with him, not only is this a brain drain for the country, but I was also thinking, where were the public opinion framers, when the spin was on about, the Afghan war is a disaster, where was the coverage of the incredible gains that Afghanistan has made? Look at the rise in female literacy. Yes, of course there was a lot more to be done, but what was singularly lacking was patience in the US, and a lot of spin. So many myths that were just carried on. Taliban 2.0. Taliban can secure Afghanistan. America's security has nothing to do with Afghanistan. Taliban can secure the country. And all these myths got blown up. I thought they would get, blown up in time. But, this is just this happening at such an accelerated rate. Like yesterday we saw, what do you mean when the Taliban gives security assurances? All these myths that, we were warning about for so long is played out within a 2-week period.
Yeah, let's talk about what happened on Thursday. The death toll at Kabul Airport, which, by the way, continues to rise. Bilal Sarawi, it's images from your telephone posted at the start of the week to social media that alerted me personally to just how tenuous. If you blink, you'll miss it. There you saw the Taliban at that checkpoint, and then it's the U.S. Marines. They're 3 meters apart?
It was, an amazing scene in some ways, but tragic in others. When we were basically finally going through the last checkpoint, well inside the Hamid Karzai International Airport, and I noticed that the Taliban and the Americans were literally 2 to 3 meters away from each other. And it does appear to me that that is sort of the buffer zone, if I could call it that. But I also witnessed the Americans and the Taliban, as well as their Afghan Special Forces allies, were talking to each other, that there was a coordination between them. And for a moment, when you look back to the last 20 years, the war, the killings, the heartbreaks, you just can't believe it, that that's the end result. And I mean, this evacuation is a disaster because it is in the 11th hour. I remember a few months before the fall of, the government, people who are eligible for SIV and other resettlement schemes were asked to go and bring their passport, marriage certificate, national ID, this document, that document. And when you went to a government office back then, the price of a passport was $1,500. Thousands of people amidst the third and deadly wave of corona pandemic were waiting for hours, for days, for nights. And it was an open secret. If you had $1,500, you could get a passport. If you didn't, you had to wait for months. And these things were actually extremely irresponsible on the part of these Western governments, because what it did, it stopped the flow of people leaving safely when they could have, especially when you talk about provinces, not Kabul. I mean, I remember covering the fall of Nangarhar, for example, the city of Jalalabad, when the governor called me 10, 12 hours before, said, look, I'm not going to put up a fight. I don't want to destroy Jalalabad. Yes, I was a close ally of Mr. Ashraf Ghani, but I'm going to do a peaceful surrender. And then at that night, I had 3 people staying with me at my house. It was a family, and they had been eligible for SIV, but they could not get the documents. They needed marriage certificates. And then they were stuck for days. They're still stuck there. So I think it's also about hasty and last minute evacuation, which everyone knows had its own challenges, And as you talk about flights and people and tragedy outside of the Hamid Karzai International Airport, we must remember that an entire generation is still hiding across Afghanistan, including in Kabul, and they have been exposed to the Taliban. They're vulnerable. They've been identified, and they simply don't feel safe leaving their homes for the Hamid Karzai International Airport or through the Taliban into the airport if they could, through the chaos and through the gunshots and stampedes. I mean, this is the end result of what should have been a better exit after 20 years.
Okay, let me put it to Rada Akbar then. When you hear Bilal Sarawi say that the difference a few months back between getting a passport and not getting one is a $1,500 bribe, whose fault is that?
I think everyone's fault. It's the government, the Americans, and international community, because I believe this was preventable. They could prevent this. They could manage this, better, in a better way. So Afghans would have time to leave the country by themselves. So they didn't have to leave in this way. Now, a lot of people are being, are left behind. And even this evacuation was not successful. The way they have been evacuating, the way they have been making lists, we see that a lot of families have been separated. Kids reached out to America without their parents, babies. And I think they could prevent this mess, and they could give us more time to manage our our exit by ourselves.
I've heard one analyst, though, say, excuse me for playing devil's advocate, that, well, it's a defeat. And in a defeat, there is no good way to leave. It's always going to be messy.
but I still believe that they could manage this, like they could handle it better. Because now it's like, I think this chaotic situation is just so shameful for the world. After 20 years of, losing thousands of lives, making so much sacrifices, and again, even this evacuation, we lost over hundreds of people yesterday to this attack. It's just shameful. This whole thing, this whole mess is so shameful. And at the end of the day, it's the Afghans who pay the price for it.
Sarah Daniel, could the evacuation have happened any differently?
Yes, of course. And you say it's a defeat. Of course it is a defeat, but it was a predictable defeat. And to have believed that the Afghan army was going to resist when we know for sure that there is corruption in its midst, and also that the soldiers are not paid enough, then when they die, their family at the end, they didn't receive any money. It was very predictable. And I was thinking, it's going to be a stain, really, it's going to be non-erasable on Biden's legacy.
Okay, let's listen on that point to the U.S. president. 13 military personnel killed. That's the United States' highest casualty toll since an attack in Mosul, Iraq in 2004.
To those who carried out this attack, as well as anyone who wishes America harm, know this: we will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay. I've also ordered my commanders to develop operational plans to strike ISIS-K assets, leadership, and facilities. We will respond with force and precision at our time, at the place we choose, in the moment of our choosing.
Sarah Daniel, you're saying that...
That's not enough. That's not, it's not, we'll not forget. It's act now. I mean, the disaster is going on now, and it's on civilians, and I don't know.
So what does that mean, acting now? Because
Well,
extending the deadline date?
No, I don't think he wants to extend the deadline. He was very clear on that, Biden. But I think maybe at some point there will be some retaliation on this ISIS group, or if he can find out who they are. As he claims he knows. But anyway, even if there is a retaliation, that's not the disaster we're talking about. It's the one that's going on now. And I think it's, at the end, I think Biden will be less well remembered even than Donald Trump. That's really some kind of an achievement.
Leo Jacinto?
I mean, I cannot predict what's going to happen.
Well, let me show you something. Let me show you that this is, it's, by the way, not just Republican lawmakers in Washington, but foreign policy hawks the world over. We can show you the front page of today's Daily Mail in the UK. It headlines, "The Tragic Price of Surrender." Your reaction to that?
Well, this is the Daily Mail UK, and I sort of I sort of don't want to get into inside the Beltway coverage of what a crisis in Afghanistan is. But, Biden is very early into his presidency. The American public has been, yes, this is a surrender, but I'm not so sure how important foreign policy is for Biden's domestic audience. This whole, the rhetoric that the war must end, this forever war. Yes, it will be a stain, but I think it'll be a bigger stain in Europe than for.
All right,
but why in Europe?
We're going to pick up. We're going to pick up on. Unfortunately, we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. It's a special edition this Friday as we watch what's unfolding in Afghanistan. We're talking about with Afghan photographer and visual artist Rada Akbar, recently evacuated to Paris last week. In fact, Bilal Sarawi, France 24's correspondent in Kabul. You've also been evacuated to Doha. Welcome back. Sarah Daniel, senior correspondent for the French news magazine Loops and the author of The Whore of the Caliphate, your latest book. Lila Jacinto, senior editor at France24.com. Lila, you were saying just before the break how in the U.S. news cycles can be fickle. Here in Europe, we'll be thinking about Afghanistan for longer.
Well, I mean, in Europe, to see this spectacle of a retreating superpower is it leaves Europe. It's not a new thought, but contemplating this alliance with a rising Russia and China. Europe is going to face the brunt of the Afghan refugee crisis, and Europe was a partner with the U.S., but the U.S. did all the heavy lifting. So yes, it makes very dismal watching for America's European allies.
Let me ask you, Bilal Sawrawi, the French, for instance, they left in 2014. Your thoughts on that when you look at what's unfolding now? It's Joe Biden who owns it entirely.
Look, Afghans always spoke to the Americans from a painful past. When Afghanistan was abandoned in the 1980s and later on the Russians had left Afghanistan, they were defeated by the Mujahideen. What did it do? It led to the civil war, to the subsequent fall and rise of the Taliban. So over the last 20 years, I would listen to former President Hamid Karzai, many of these players from the 80s and 90s, and they would say, actually, the Americans are going to leave one day. So that fear always played on the minds of the people of Afghanistan. Speaking to a very senior Afghan counterterrorism advisor in 2018 and 2019, he told me that what he did not understand, why were the Americans not allowing the stay of a couple thousand forces where they did not sustain any casualties and fatalities, and that served as an insurance for larger American counterterrorism interests, but also for the stability in Afghanistan. And what we have to really remember that when the Biden administration announced that they were leaving Afghanistan, that they were withdrawing militarily, they did that in the absence of a credible and meaningful peace process. They did that in the absence of a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire. And once that announcement came out, people started taking insurance at a village district level. People were making their own deals. The Taliban were so smart that they were basically infiltrating the highest echelons of the Afghan government and literally telling people, look, the Americans will leave. We're here. If you do not fight with us, if you surrender to us, we will not bother you. And to me, that is a massive security and intelligence failure, not on the part of the Afghan government, but also for all of these Western intelligence agencies, that they have had a massive presence there. I think what was also very disheartening among the Afghan officials at that time that I was speaking to, when the Americans left the Bagram Air Base with lights off in the middle of the night, not informing the Afghan commander. And that withdrawal also meant that the American contractors had left. So the maintenance for the Afghan Air Force was not there because obviously the Special Mission Wing or the 777 Brigade, who I actually traveled quite extensively with their pilots when they were conducting major counterterrorism and counter-narcotics raids all over Afghanistan, found out that the Americans had actually taken the sophisticated anti-aircraft, system, which basically prevented these helicopters from being brought down by, weapons that the Iranians had provided to the Taliban, according to, again, Afghan counterterrorism officials. And we saw that as a signal among the elite special forces, among the Special Mission Wing guys, and they were confused. They thought, okay, what is happening? America is abandoning us. The Taliban are coming. The political Kabul is divided. And to be honest with you, I always found the former president in a circle of closer, allies extremely disconnected from the battlefield commanders across the country. Then you had the constant changes in the security leadership. I remember speaking to the former Army Chief of Staff, General Yassin Zia, who also was a very close ally of Ahmad Shah Massoud in the 1990s, and it served in various capacities. And one day he told me, the biggest hurdle right now to me is the interference in my work from Kabul. The indifference from the Americans, and then the expectation from the people. And I was traveling with him. Literally in 48 hours, he was fighting with elite forces in Puli-Khomri, the capital of Baghlan. Then he was called to another provincial capital, into another provincial capital. So the Taliban had this calculation that, okay, the Afghans are not going to have the same air support. They have lost all the logistical support. And they had basically built on that. So it's not like everything just crumbled suddenly.
Yeah.
But obviously, when you talk about major ANDSF providing provinces in eastern Afghanistan, northern Afghanistan, where communities were being asked, to send their family members, sons and brothers to fight, and the money was stolen and their living conditions were bad and they didn't have the right supply or leadership, it all contributed to the fall. But let's also put it into another context here. Billions of dollars worth of American money, international money, spent. Forget about all the sacrifices and blood that everyone made, including the Afghans. What is the end result? The end result is that the Taliban control billions of dollars worth of sensitive military equipment. They have helicopters. They have control of airports. Everything literally went down the drain. And in my view, something like this must have a 9/11 style commission report, because all of these Western countries use their taxpayers' money, and they told their people that this is what we were doing. Now that the end result is this, I think the citizens of Afghanistan
have to call them to account. Let me bring in Sarah Daniel on this. Again, it's the question of, you're France. You've left in 2014. Is it just Joe Biden's problem and not yours, what Bilal is describing?
Well, obviously it's going to be ours because of the refugee crisis that is going to follow. But what is very surprising for me is that the Americans, they prepared very carefully the political side of this pullout, like those talks in Doha that were happening between them and the Taliban. It was not actually a peace process. It was a withdrawal process. It was supposed to prepare, the withdrawal of the troops and going to some agreements on the political side. So what I don't understand is why they didn't put the same care to take care of the military side and of the fact that they will go little by little and pull out their allies and all those people, like the letter I read to you. This is very hard to understand and to figure it out. And also, you were saying. You were talking about the lack of intelligence, on the deficiency of the intelligence, which is also very surprising, because how come they didn't foresee that it was not going to stay for 2 years, that it
was not going to be like after when the Soviets pulled out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And also the fact that, as you said, that there's this myth of the Taliban have changed and now we can talk with them. And what they have prepared now is that all the surrounding the neighborhoods countries, the neighboring countries, are going to acknowledge the Taliban. And
whereas the last time it was less than a handful of countries that did recognize the Taliban. Right now, we're in this situation coming up to that August 31st deadline for evacuations, where everyone is talking to the Taliban, the French confirming it this Friday. And in light of that attack claimed by that radical group ISIS-K, the Pentagon has been speaking about the, quote, operational reality on the ground.
The threat from ISIS is extremely real. We're doing everything we can to be prepared for those attacks. That includes reaching out to the Taliban, who are actually providing the outer security cordon around the airfield, to make sure they know what we expect them to do to protect us. And we will continue to coordinate with them as they go forward.
Rada Akbar, what's your reaction?
I'm just surprised the way they are just, continuing this, and then like every time they just blame Afghans, on their failures. They just keep surprising me and making me feel more ashamed and, insulted and disrespected.
Insulted and disrespected because?
Because this was not our failure. It was their failure. They are the superpower. They have been there for the past 2 decades, and now just leaving this way and then blaming Afghans for everything is just insulting and disrespectful.
And the fact that they say that, well, we are in contact we're being pragmatic, we are negotiating with the Taliban.
When they started this peace process, we started panicking from the very, beginning, because they excluded women, they excluded victims, they excluded, press and civil society. And that is why we started raising our voices against this whole process, because this was not peace process. This was just a withdrawal process, and it was unconditional. It was just an agreement between the Taliban and the Americans to make their exit, harmless for themselves. But then, as we have been witnessing, the Taliban just intensified war against Afghan civilians. And
And so we heard both Leila and Sarah talking about this spin that's been put on it, about how the Taliban perhaps have changed, have softened. France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent went on patrol with the Taliban in the streets of Kabul earlier this week, with a government yet to be formed. Very much it sounds like the new masters of Kabul are keen to put their best face forward, at least in words.
Security and order are back in Kabul. There's no more burglary. All this is now forbidden under our law. There is an amnesty. We do forgive everybody, even militants, anyone who made problems in the past, even military.
Yeah, of course, that's what they're saying. On the other hand, what we're also hearing is a different story when you speak to Afghans, other Afghans who don't have a gun. France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent had to change names and blur faces when she interviewed professional women in the Afghan capital.
The first day when Taliban came in Kabul, really I can't breathe. I couldn't breathe. All study, my all background, now it's like a grave. I had a good job in Ministry of Public Work. I had so much good pay, money for to help my family, but now I haven't.
What do you think when you hear this, Madame, coming from your daughter?
با خدا تغییر کرده در روز قوارش تغییر کرد ما زیاد رنج میبرم دیگه چاره نداریم چی کنیم اگر کمک کنن مرا خیر به می جوانا کمک کنن من میگذارم به می دخترم به اون بچه و مسئله صنف اول پنتون است.
So, Rada Akbar, how does that younger generation fight back?
I don't know, because without the international community's support and attention, I really don't know how they are going to survive. And that breaks my heart every day, to just think about thousands of millions of Afghans, being left there. And that is why I'm hoping and I'm asking the international community to not turn their back to Afghanistan and Afghans, to put pressure on Taliban to save and protect Afghans and civil society. Honestly, I'm just so frustrated and so terrified when I think about all those people who are left in Afghanistan.
Bilal Sarawi, does history repeat itself, particularly when it comes to the way Afghans treat women?
Well, the Taliban would have to prove that they can transition from fighting into governance, that they can adopt to the new transformation, the political and social. If they can't do that, and if they basically try to impose bans on women and they try to be harsh in their way of treating Afghans, then I'm afraid the Taliban will face opposition and resistance eventually. And I hope that the Taliban and others have learned from the history. The Afghan people are not willing to go back. There's too much a price that was paid to get where we are. But quite tragically, for me, what I looked like, what I looked at it after a couple of days, to me it looked like 20 years of sacrifices, blood and treasure and all those lives lost. Literally everything went down the drain. And the Taliban, we have to remember, still they don't have a government. They still don't have a functioning government.
But Bilal, let me ask you, because back in the 90s, when they were in charge the last time, women were told to stay home. Now it's a little more than, 1/5 of all women are in the workforce. They can't send them all home, or else how do they run the economy?
We will have to keep an eye on Kabul, obviously, but outside of Kabul is where I'm more interested, because in places like Kandahar and Herat, they did ask women not to turn to work in banks and other government offices. I mean, at the moment, you've got a dysfunctional Afghanistan. You've got an Afghanistan where all the employees, from security sector to civil servants, even those in the health ministry and banking and other sectors, simply don't feel safe, those who have stayed behind, to come back and resume work. And I think that conducive environment, that trust has to be, instilled by the Taliban on the ground. I mean, it does send a very negative message when a Taliban commander beats up a Tulu news reporter in the heart of Kabul city, a prominent reporter from eastern Afghanistan, as he's trying to film, about the issues of economy, and he was interviewing laborers. It is a great sign that they are talking to Tulu TV, their presenters, but the reality for others is quite different. For example, they did turn down several female presenters with Radio Television Afghanistan, which now they've renamed Radio and TV Sharia. Back then, when they were in Afghanistan, the country did not have the citizen journalism generation. People did not have access to internet.
Times have changed. Let me bring in Leila Jacinto on this.
Well, I mean, what strikes me is that, the Taliban have been preparing for this. When it comes to women's rights, they have this standard line that, Afghan, it won't be a repeat of the 1990s. Women will be allowed to engage within an Islamic framework. And still no detail on what exactly this Islamic framework is. I spoke to two of Afghanistan's leading women's rights activists. One activist is staying in Kabul. She told me that at 73, she's prepared to face the danger. Another women's rights activist runs one of Afghanistan's largest women's network. They have domestic violence shelters across Afghanistan. She said that they have always worked respecting Afghan culture and, the religious environment. She also said that should the Taliban allow them to provide the services, they are willing to do it. But there is absolutely no detail. And mind you, these are services that the Taliban has no experience in providing. So, what is the problem? Okay, we understand that, the Taliban, contrary to the 2.0 myth, there are different Talibans. There's the political office, there are the foot soldiers, but even the political office cannot detail what exactly is an Islamic framework. It's not like Afghanistan is the only Islamic country in the world. There are so many models that, at least lay out the details of what this means.
Sarah Daniel?
A few days ago, I spoke with Khadija Amin, which was this leading presenter. She was anchorwoman for the Afghan TV, and she has just been turned away when she wanted to take her job. And exactly at the same time, there was the press conference of the Taliban saying we're going to grant rights to women and we're going to do such and such. So I mean, the idea that the Taliban has changed is such a joke. And it's really a very backward government, and it's going to be the only thing that has changed is the communication, is the way that they have learned maybe from the Qatari or from the Al Jazeera crew how to talk.
Pakistani education.
Or Pakistani education, or I don't know, but they've learned to put some milk and to put some honey in the speech, but nothing beyond.
But it's just words. Just before we leave, Rada Akbar, we couldn't help but show our viewers, back in May, you went on assignment for the charity Visions for Children. You photographed one child in the classroom. We can call up perhaps that photo. And it's such a fresh face, full of hope. And it would be great to finish. Oh, that's the wrong image there. Finish on that picture. There you have it. And when you look at that picture taken just back in May, you think to yourself, well, times have changed very fast. They can change back again.
I really hope so, because I still cannot believe what really happened. That we lost everything overnight. And I just can't stop thinking about all those kids, children, and young people, the new generations, having so much hope for the future. And I'm still very hopeful that maybe things change again for better. That is all I can say. That I think we need to stay hopeful.
Need to stay hopeful, and our thoughts are with you, and we hope you'll continue to speak through your art and through your photography. Rada Akbar, thanks so much for joining us. I want to thank as well Bilal Sarwari, great to see you, and the best of luck to you and yours over in Doha. Lila Jacinto, Saha Daniel, thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.